When my child claimed her mother's former partner was a better parent than me, I decided to grant her wish and cut off all financial support. Now she's begging to return to our previous arrangement. Hey Reddit, this is going to be a long story, but I desperately need to get this off my chest. The whole situation is still unfolding and seems to be getting crazier by the day. I'm not sure if I made the right decision, but I can't take it back now. My name is Kevin, and I'm 42 years old. I've been raising my daughter Madison, who just turned 18, completely by myself since she was only 6 years old. She's a senior in high school now, and up until recently, I thought we had a great relationship. Her mother, Victoria, who's 41, literally just vanished from our lives without any warning back in 2010. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. It was a random Thursday evening, and I came home from work expecting our usual family dinner and some quality time together. Instead, I found a handwritten note sitting on the kitchen counter. The note simply said that Victoria needed to follow her heart and had decided to go back to her high school boyfriend, Tyler. Just like that, she was gone. What made it even worse was that Victoria had packed all her belongings while I was pulling overtime at the job site. She completely disappeared from our lives, leaving me alone with a confused 6-year-old who kept asking when mommy was coming home. Let me tell you, that was a fun conversation to have with a kindergartner who couldn't understand why her mother would just leave without saying goodbye. I work as an HVAC technician for a mid-sized construction company. It's honest work that pays decently, and while I'm not rich by any means, I've always been comfortable enough to provide for my family. After Victoria abandoned us, I made a decision that would shape the next 13 years of my life. I decided that everything I had, every dollar I earned, every free moment I had, every plan I made for the future, would be dedicated to giving Madison the best possible life. I'm not going to lie to you, it's been incredibly tough. My social life basically ceased to exist overnight. I haven't been on a real date in probably 7 years because I've been so focused on being the best father I could be. The point is, Madison has been my entire world for over a decade. Every decision I make, every dollar I spend, and every plan I have for the future revolves around her success and happiness. Throughout all these years, Madison has never wanted for anything. She's never had to worry about money or wonder if she could participate in an activity because we couldn't afford it. I've made sure that she's had every opportunity and advantage that I never had growing up. She's been living the life that most kids her age can only dream of, and I was proud to be able to provide that for her. 3 weeks ago, I was sitting at home watching TV after a long day at work when I heard a knock on my front door. I looked through the peephole and almost didn't recognize the woman standing on my porch. It was Victoria, 13 years older, with a completely different haircut, but definitely her. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. When I opened the door, she was standing there with this fake smile plastered on her face, acting like she was just dropping by to borrow a cup of sugar or catch up on old times. There was no apology, no explanation for where she'd been for over a decade, and certainly no acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. She just looked at me and said, "Hi, Kevin. I'm ready to be in Madison's life now. Ready?" The audacity of that statement hit me like a truck. Like she'd been preparing for some big performance all these years, and now she'd finally gotten her act together enough to grace us with her presence. She stood there talking about how she'd grown as a person and learned what really matters in life. She said she wanted to start seeing Madison regularly, wanted to build a real relationship with her, and wanted to be the mother she should have been all along. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face right then and there. This woman had abandoned us when being a parent meant actual work and sacrifice. She disappeared when Madison needed her most, during those formative years when a little girl desperately needs her mother's love and guidance. Now she was showing up when Madison was practically an adult, completely past all the hard years of tantrums and homework battles, staying up all night with fevers, and dealing with the day-to-day challenges of raising a child. But I also knew what it was like to grow up without a parent. My own father took off when I was 13 years old, and I'd always wondered what could have been if he'd stayed, or if he'd tried to come back. I didn't want Madison to have that same regret or lifelong curiosity about her mother. So despite every instinct telling me to protect us from this woman, I told Victoria that if Madison wanted to see her, that was between the two of them. I wouldn't stop it or interfere, but I also wasn't going to make it easy for her. Victoria could earn her way back into our daughter's life if she was truly serious about being a mother. When I told Madison about her mother's unexpected return, she was understandably confused. She barely remembered Victoria since she'd been so young when her mother left, but she was also curious about this missing piece of her life. What teenage girl wouldn't want to know her mother and understand where she came from? I could see the hope and excitement in her eyes, mixed with uncertainty about what this all meant. Victoria started slow at first, which I thought was a good sign. She asked to meet Madison for coffee, wanted to take her shopping, and suggested they do other fun activities together. She was doing all the enjoyable stuff that comes with being a parent, but without any of the actual responsibility that parenting requires. Within just 1 week, however, Victoria's true colors started showing through. She wasn't making requests anymore. She was making demands about when she could see Madison, where they would go, what time Madison needed to be home, and how their relationship would work. The entitlement was absolutely incredible. Here I was, the guy who'd been doing everything for 13 years straight, and she was rolling in expecting to have an equal say in all the decisions about Madison's life. She was acting like she had parental rights after more than a decade of providing absolutely nothing. No support, no contact, no presence whatsoever. Despite my growing frustration with Victoria's attitude, I kept my mouth shut about the whole situation because Madison seemed genuinely happy. She was excited to have her mother back in her life and kept talking about all the mother-daughter bonding time they were going to have. She was finally getting to understand where she came from and learn about this missing piece of her identity. I figured that maybe this could actually work out for everyone involved. Maybe Victoria had actually grown up and matured over the years, and maybe she was finally ready to be a real parent. Maybe Madison could have both of us in her life and benefit from having two parents who cared about her. Man, was I completely wrong about that assumption. Last Monday, Victoria showed up at my door again, but this time she wasn't alone. There was a guy with her, and I immediately knew this had to be Tyler, the high school boyfriend she'd run off with all those years ago. The dude pulled up to my house in a 2020 Mustang that was bright yellow with a loud exhaust system. Basically the whole look at me package that screams for attention. He appeared to be in his mid-30s and was wearing a designer polo shirt that probably cost more than I spend on clothes in 4 months. He had a thick gold chain around his neck and was sporting the whole flashy look that some guys think makes them appear successful. This was the guy Victoria had left us for, and he was exactly what you'd expect from someone like that. Tyler got out of the car like he owned the entire neighborhood, adjusting his shirt and strutting up to my front door like he'd been personally invited to some important meeting. Victoria was hanging on his arm with this incredibly smug look on her face, like she was showing off her prized possession to someone who couldn't possibly compete. When I opened the door, Victoria immediately started talking before I could even process what was happening. She was going on about how Madison needed to meet Tyler, how they were a package deal now, and how Madison needed to understand her real family situation. Real family. I'd only been the one keeping this kid fed, clothed, educated, and loved for 13 straight years. But sure, these two people were apparently her real family now. Tyler stepped forward and tried to shake my hand, but it was one of those overly aggressive handshakes where he was squeezing way too hard and holding on much longer than necessary. The guy was clearly trying to establish some kind of dominance right from the very beginning. He looked me up and down, taking in my work clothes and boots, and I could see him making immediate judgments about who I was and what I represented. Then he said something that I'll never forget. "So you're the guy who's been watching our girl. Not taking care of her, not raising her, not being her father, but watching her. Like I was some temporary babysitter who'd been filling in until the real parents could show up." Victoria immediately jumped in, explaining that they wanted Madison to start spending weekends at their place. She wasn't asking if this was okay with me, and she wasn't discussing any kind of gradual introduction or transition period. She was simply announcing that this was how things were going to be from now on. She needs to know her family, Victoria said with complete conviction. She needs to see what a real relationship looks like. I stood there thinking to myself, what real relationship are you talking about? This woman had abandoned her own child for this guy, and now they were going to show Madison what family really means? But Madison was standing behind me in the hallway, and she was looking genuinely excited about the whole thing. She wanted to see where her mother lived, wanted to understand this part of her life that had been missing for so long, and wanted to experience what it felt like to have a complete family. So despite every red flag going off in my head, I agreed to let her spend weekends with them. I mean, what was the worst that could possibly happen, right? That first weekend when I picked Madison up from Victoria and Tyler's place, she absolutely wouldn't stop talking about Tyler's apartment and their lifestyle. Apparently, they live in this incredibly fancy apartment complex across town. The kind of place that has a swimming pool, a fully equipped gym, and even a doorman greeting residents. Tyler drives multiple nice cars, wears expensive designer clothes, and takes them out to restaurants that I honestly can't afford on my HVAC technician salary. Victoria had apparently been filling Madison's head with stories about their exciting lifestyle, telling her all about how they travel to different places and go to concerts regularly. They were living this glamorous, carefree life that seemed like something out of a magazine. Meanwhile, I was starting to feel like the boring, responsible HVAC technician dad who made Madison do her homework every night and complete her chores around the house. The contrast was becoming painfully obvious, and I could see how appealing their lifestyle must have seemed to an 18-year-old girl who'd been living a more structured, disciplined life with me. But what really got under my skin was when Madison started repeating things that Tyler had apparently been saying about me during their weekend together. She began telling me how Tyler had explained that HVAC technicians don't really need much education to do their jobs, and how trade work is basically what people do when they can't handle the demands of college. According to Tyler, a real man would have made something more substantial of himself by this point in his life. This was coming from a guy who, as I later discovered, works part-time at Target. After hearing these comments, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I looked Tyler up on social media platforms, and his LinkedIn profile showed that he'd been bouncing between various retail jobs for years. Currently, he was working maybe 20 hours per week in the electronics department at Target. Hardly the successful career he was apparently portraying to Madison. But he had tons of pictures of himself wearing expensive clothes, standing next to nice cars, and living what appeared to be a very affluent lifestyle. Either this guy had significant family money backing him, or he was living way beyond his actual means and going into serious debt to maintain this image. The second weekend that Madison spent with them was significantly worse than the first. When she came back to our house, she wouldn't stop talking about how Victoria and Tyler's relationship was relationship goals, and how they truly understood each other in ways that other couples didn't. She kept going on about how they supported each other's dreams and aspirations, and how they didn't try to control each other like so many other couples do. She kept looking directly at me when she made that last comment, as if I was somehow being controlling by having basic rules and expectations for my teenage daughter. Then she started making direct comparisons between our modest house and their fancy apartment. She talked about how their place had beautiful granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, how they had a massive big screen TV with surround sound, and how everything in their apartment was modern and stylish. Not old and basic like our place, she said. Old and basic. This was the house that I'd been working overtime to pay for since before she was even born. The house where I'd given her everything she'd ever needed or wanted. And now it was just old and basic compared to Tyler's flashy apartment. By the third weekend, Madison's attitude toward me was getting noticeably worse. She'd come home from Victoria and Tyler's place acting like I was somehow beneath her, rolling her eyes whenever I asked about her homework assignments, and sighing dramatically when I reminded her about her responsibilities around the house. She started making little snide comments about my truck, my work clothes, and my job. Things that had never bothered her before, but were now apparently sources of embarrassment. Things got even worse when Madison started missing her dance classes. At first, it was just one class here and there, but then it became 2 classes, and eventually she was skipping them regularly. When I asked her about it, she explained that Victoria thought dance was kind of juvenile for someone her age. According to her mother, maybe Madison should be focusing on more mature interests instead of wasting time with dance. When I pressed her about what these mature interests might be, she just shrugged and said she was still figuring it out. This was a girl who had been passionate about dance for years, who had worked incredibly hard to develop her skills, and who had always looked forward to her classes. Her academic performance started slipping dramatically as well. Madison had always been an exceptional student. She'd maintained straight A's since elementary school and had been on the honor roll every single semester. Suddenly, she was coming home with B's and C's on her report cards, and she wasn't turning in assignments that should have been easy for her to complete. When I tried to have a conversation with her about her declining grades, she became immediately defensive and dismissive. "Not everyone has to be perfect all the time," she told me, with an attitude I'd never seen from her before. Maybe I want to enjoy being a teenager instead of stressing about every little grade. This was coming from the same girl who had been planning to attend Duke University since middle school. The same girl who used to study for hours every night because she wanted to be the best journalist she could possibly be. She had always been driven and ambitious, and now she was acting like academic excellence was some kind of burden she didn't want to carry anymore. The breaking point came last Thursday evening. I got home from work absolutely exhausted because I'd been running HVAC installation for a new office building all day long. Thursday had always been our grocery shopping day. For the past few years, we'd made it a tradition to go to the store together every Thursday evening. Madison would help me plan meals for the upcoming week, and we'd talk about what was going on in her life, her school activities, and her future plans. It was one of our regular bonding activities that I'd always looked forward to. I asked her to grab her shoes so we could head to the store like we always did. She looked at me like I had just asked her to clean sewage pipes with her bare hands. The expression of disgust and annoyance on her face was something I'd never seen before. "Seriously?" she said with complete disdain. "You can't handle grocery shopping by yourself? Are you really that needy?" Needy. She called me needy for wanting to spend time with my daughter and maintain the traditions we'd built together over the years. For trying to preserve the activities that had always brought us closer together. That's when I knew for certain that Victoria and Tyler had completely poisoned her mind against me. The kid who used to help me cook dinner every single night, who used to tell me about her day while we folded laundry together, who used to actually enjoy spending time with her old man, was now treating me like some pathetic loser who couldn't function without her constant presence. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked her, genuinely confused by her sudden hostility. That's when everything absolutely exploded, and I mean everything came pouring out at once. She'd apparently been thinking about this for weeks, building up resentment and anger, and it all just erupted in that moment. She started going off about how I didn't understand her the way Victoria and Tyler did, how I was always trying to control her life instead of supporting her dreams and aspirations, and how I made everything about grades and responsibility instead of letting her be a normal teenager. According to Madison, Victoria never tried to micromanage every aspect of her life the way I did. I stood there listening to this, thinking to myself, micromanage? I'm the guy who's been funding every single dream she's ever had. I'm the one who drives her anywhere she wants to go and buys her anything she needs. I work overtime constantly so she can have opportunities that I never had growing up. But apparently, providing for her and having expectations was somehow controlling and oppressive. But then she said the words that I will never, ever forget for as long as I live. Madison looked me dead in the eye with this smirk on her face, a cold, calculating expression that I'd never seen from her before, and said, "Look, at this point you're basically just my stepdad. Tyler is more of a father figure than you'll ever be. Just her stepdad. After 13 years of being the only parent who showed up for absolutely everything, every school event, every dance recital, every parent-teacher conference. After missing countless family gatherings, social events, and potential romantic relationships because I was busy being a dedicated father. After working myself into the ground to pay for her dreams and give her every opportunity I could possibly provide. After sacrificing my own needs and wants to ensure she never felt like she was missing out on anything because she only had one parent. I was just her stepdad. But she wasn't finished destroying me yet. Madison kept going, explaining that Tyler didn't lecture her about college applications like I did, and he didn't make her feel guilty for wanting different things in life. According to her, Tyler actually supported her dreams instead of pushing his own agenda on her. He treated her like family, not like some project he was trying to perfect. Then came the real knife twist that cut deeper than anything else she could have said. She looked at me with complete contempt and said, "You're just the guy who pays for stuff. That doesn't make you my real dad." She continued explaining that being a father is about understanding and emotional support, not just throwing money at problems and expecting gratitude in return. According to Madison, Tyler understood what real parenting meant, while I was just some guy who happened to be financially responsible for her expenses. I felt something break inside me when she said those words. It wasn't just anger or hurt feelings, it was something much deeper than that. It felt like 13 years of my life had just been completely erased, like everything I'd sacrificed and worked for meant absolutely nothing. All those nights I'd stayed up when she was sick, holding her hand and making sure she was okay. All those dance recitals where I was the only parent in the audience cheering for her, while other kids had both parents there supporting them. All those parent-teacher conferences where I showed up alone, asking detailed questions about her progress and how I could help her succeed at home. All those sacrifices I'd made, all the love I'd poured into raising her, all the time and energy I'd invested in being the best father I could possibly be. And according to her, I was just the guy who paid for stuff. None of it mattered because I wasn't her real dad. So I told her, "Okay, if I'm just your stepdad and Tyler is your real father figure, then you need to pack your things. You're not staying here anymore." I said it calmly and clearly. making sure she understood that this wasn't a threat or an empty gesture. This was a direct consequence of the choice she'd just made about who her real family was. Madison actually laughed when I said that. She genuinely thought I was telling some kind of hilarious joke. She said I was being dramatic and that I'd get over it like I always did whenever we had disagreements. She acted like this was just another one of my temporary moods that she'd have to tolerate until things went back to normal. That's when I realized she had absolutely no idea how serious I was about this situation. Madison thought she could say whatever she wanted to me, tear me down as much as she pleased, and there would never be any real consequences. She believed she could insult me, demote me from father to just her stepdad, and I'd continue paying for her lifestyle while she gave someone else all the credit for being her real parent. She wanted the best of both worlds. Tyler's fun, relaxed parenting style combined with my bank account funding everything she wanted. I told her I wasn't joking at all. She had exactly 2 hours to pack all of her belongings and figure out where she was going to live, because she would not be staying in my house anymore. That's when her entire attitude completely changed. The smirk disappeared from her face and she started backtracking immediately, saying she didn't mean what she'd said the way it sounded. She claimed she was just frustrated and had expressed her feelings wrong, and that of course I was her dad. She was just trying to explain how she felt about the situation with Victoria and Tyler. But it was far too late for explanations or apologies. You can't call someone just your stepdad and then pretend it was some kind of misunderstanding when there are suddenly consequences for your words. Instead of apologizing sincerely or showing any genuine remorse for what she'd said, Madison got completely nasty with me. She started yelling about how I was being absolutely ridiculous over one comment, and how I was proving her point about being controlling and overly dramatic. According to her, Victoria was right about me not being able to handle Madison having other people in her life who cared about her. She was acting like I was the unreasonable one for having feelings about being called just a stepdad by the daughter I'd raised alone for 13 years. While she was angrily packing her belongings, Madison called Victoria and put the call on speakerphone so I could hear everything that was being said. She told Victoria how completely unreasonable I was being, how I was kicking her out over absolutely nothing, and how this whole situation proved that Tyler was right about my character and my inability to handle conflict maturely. Victoria's voice came through the phone, telling Madison that she could stay with them for as long as she needed to. Victoria said that this situation just showed that Madison truly belonged with her real family anyway, and that they would take care of her properly, unlike some people who use money to control and manipulate others. The passive-aggressive dig was obviously directed at me, and it was clear that Victoria was enjoying this dramatic turn of events. The packing process took about an hour, and watching it was surreal. Madison was stuffing suitcases with all the designer clothes that I had bought for her over the years, the expensive laptop that I had purchased for her schoolwork, and the iPhone that I pay for every single month. She packed all her jewelry, makeup, and accessories, basically everything she owned that had come from my work, my sacrifices, and my love. But apparently, none of that financial support mattered because I wasn't her real dad. When everything was packed and ready to go, I stacked all of her suitcases by the front door and waited. I wasn't about to waste gas money driving to Victoria and Tyler's place for this ridiculous circus. About 10 minutes later, Tyler pulled up right in front of my house like he owned the entire street. He stepped out of his flashy yellow Mustang with all the swagger and attitude you'd expect, his gold chain swinging as he walked. He threw me a look like he was doing me some massive favor by picking up Madison, and he didn't even bother saying hello or acknowledging my presence. Tyler just casually popped his trunk open and then nodded at Madison, like she was some kind of celebrity he was picking up for a VIP event. Victoria was naturally riding shotgun with that smug grin plastered all over her face, like she had just won front row seats to the most entertaining drama show of the year. She was clearly enjoying every moment of this situation. Tyler took his sweet time loading Madison's bags into his car, making sure to put on a show for the whole neighborhood. Meanwhile, Victoria was making loud comments about how Madison finally belonged with people who really understood her and appreciated her for who she was. Tyler even patted Madison on the shoulder like he was her knight in shining armor, rescuing her from some terrible situation. Before Tyler got back into his car, he looked me directly in the eye with a smirk and said that they would take really good care of Madison from now on. The implication was clear. He was suggesting that I hadn't been taking good care of her, and that he was somehow a better father figure than I could ever be. I just stood there with no arguments left to make, watching Madison climb into the backseat of Tyler's car with her head held high, like she had just reclaimed her freedom from some oppressive situation. She didn't even glance back at me or the house where she'd grown up. She just stared straight ahead between Victoria and Tyler, like she had somehow leveled up in life and was moving on to bigger and better things. When they drove off, blasting some bass-heavy music that was probably disturbing the entire neighborhood, I went back inside my now empty house. The silence and echo hit completely different than it ever had before. Madison's last words kept bouncing around in my head over and over again. Just a stepdad, the guy who pays for stuff. All right then, I thought to myself. Let's see how long her rescue squad can keep the lights on when the guy who pays for stuff stops paying for everything. Good luck, kid. You're going to need it more than you realize. For the past 13 years, I had been paying $450 every single month for Madison's dance classes, so she could fit in with her peers and pursue her passion. I had covered $20,000 annually for her private school tuition to keep her in that elite academic circle and ensure she received the best education possible. I had bought her a brand new Honda Civic for her 17th birthday, and I was still making payments of $520 every month on that car loan. Over the years, I had also built up $95,000 in a dedicated college fund so she could chase her dream of attending Duke University to study journalism. Every single overtime shift I worked, every side job I took on, every sacrifice I made went directly into making sure Madison never felt like she was missing out on anything because she only had one parent. So the first thing I did after she left was call the school and immediately withdraw every dollar I had been contributing toward Madison's tuition. If she genuinely didn't think I was her real father, then I was completely done paying like one. When I spoke to the school's financial office, they told me they would need new payment arrangements established very quickly, or Madison would be removed from classes. I told them that wasn't my problem anymore. Her real family could figure out how to handle her educational expenses. Next, I called the dance academy and canceled Madison's membership effective immediately. I told them that her new father figure could pick up that monthly bill if he wanted her to continue with her classes. The people at the dance studio were shocked by my decision since Madison had been enrolled there for years, but I explained that my financial responsibility for her activities had officially ended. They could direct any future billing to the people who thought they were capable of being her parents. Finally, I called Madison's SAT tutor and terminated every remaining session we had scheduled. I told him to send the final invoice to the ones who believed they could handle all aspects of being Madison's parents from now on. I was completely done playing the role of an ATM machine for people who didn't want me around and didn't appreciate everything I'd been doing for them. While I was making all these phone calls, my phone kept buzzing constantly with text messages from Victoria. The messages started Friday afternoon and continued nonstop throughout the weekend. "What's wrong with you? You can't just abandon your daughter like this," one message read. "She made one comment, and you're destroying her entire future," said another. "This is emotional abuse," Victoria wrote. "We're going to get lawyers involved if you don't start acting like a father." That last message actually made me laugh out loud. Acting like a father? I had been acting like a dedicated, responsible father for 13 straight years. Now I was acting exactly like what Madison had told me I was. Just some guy who had been temporarily helping out with expenses. If I was just a stepdad and Tyler was her real father figure, then Tyler could start handling all the financial responsibilities that come with being a parent. Saturday morning, I took the Honda Civic to a dealership for an appraisal. The dealer offered me $24,000 for the car, which wasn't a bad deal considering I still owed $9,000 on the loan. I paid off the remaining balance that same day and pocketed the extra $15,000. If Tyler wanted to play the role of Madison's father, then he could figure out how to provide her with transportation. I was done being her free ride to everywhere she wanted to go. The car situation was where Victoria really lost her mind completely. She called me screaming at the top of her lungs about how I was being vindictive and petty. According to Victoria, Madison desperately needed that car for work, school, and her social life, and I was punishing an innocent kid just for expressing her honest feelings about the situation. I reminded Victoria that Madison had expressed her feelings pretty clearly. I wasn't her real father, and Tyler was more of a father figure than I would ever be. I explained to Victoria that real fathers buy cars for their children, but since I was just some random guy according to Madison, I had sold the car that I legally owned and pocketed the money. Victoria threatened to call the police and report me for theft, but I calmly explained that the car was registered in my name. financed under my credit, and insured under my policy. Legally, it was my personal property to sell whenever I wanted to. If Madison wanted a car, her real family could provide one for her. Sunday was when Madison finally called me directly for the first time since she had left the house on Thursday. I could hear her crying through the phone, really sobbing, not the manipulative kind of tears she'd used before, but more like genuine panic tears. The reality of her situation was finally starting to hit her, and she was beginning to understand the consequences of her choices. She was going on and on about how St. Michael's private school had called her and said she would be officially withdrawn by Tuesday if the tuition wasn't paid immediately. Her dance studio had also contacted her to say that all of her classes had been canceled due to non-payment. Most importantly, she had no way to get to her part-time job at the mall without the car, which meant she couldn't even earn the small amount of money she was making there. "Dad, you're ruining my entire life over one stupid comment," she said through her tears. I corrected her immediately. "My name is Kevin, not Dad." I explained that I wasn't ruining anything at all. I was simply no longer paying for things that weren't my responsibility. She could ask Tyler to handle all these expenses, since he was apparently such a great father figure. "You know he can't afford all this stuff," Madison said. And that's when it finally hit me like a ton of bricks. She knew. She had always known that Victoria and Tyler couldn't actually support her lifestyle or pay for the things she wanted. The entire time she had been talking about what a wonderful father figure Tyler was, she knew he was essentially broke and couldn't provide for her financially. She had been planning to keep me around as the financial provider while giving Tyler all the credit as the emotional support and real parent. Madison wanted the absolute best of both worlds. Tyler's fun, relaxed parenting style that didn't involve any rules or expectations, combined with my bank account funding every aspect of her comfortable lifestyle. She thought she could insult me, demote me from father to just her stepdad, and I would continue paying for her entire life while she gave someone else all the credit for being her real dad. But that wasn't going to be my problem anymore. I told her, "You made your choice about who your real family is, so now you need to live with the consequences of that decision." Monday morning, Victoria showed up at my house with Madison, and both of them were looking absolutely desperate. The reality of their situation was finally sinking in, and they were starting to panic about how they were going to manage everything. Victoria had dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in days, and Madison looked like she had been crying constantly. They wanted to come inside my house and talk this through like adults, as Victoria put it. Victoria kept saying that we needed to put Madison's needs first, and that personal feelings between adults shouldn't affect a child's future. I told them through my closed front door that there was absolutely nothing to discuss. Madison had a real family now, and they could handle all of her needs without any input from me. I was just the guy who used to pay for stuff, and that financial arrangement was officially over forever. Victoria started banging on my door frantically, yelling about how I was destroying a child's life out of pure spite. She screamed that I was being vindictive and cruel, and that no real father would ever abandon their daughter like this over a simple disagreement. That's when Madison really started sobbing uncontrollably. She was pressed against my front door, begging me to just talk to her and work something out. She pleaded with me not to throw away 18 years of our relationship over one fight. 18 years, not the 13 years since Victoria had abandoned us. Madison was talking about 18 years like Victoria had actually been present and involved in raising her during those first 6 years of her life. Even now, when she was desperately trying to get back into my good graces, Madison couldn't admit that I was the one who had actually raised her and been there for her throughout her entire childhood. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called my neighbor Jim, who works as a sheriff's deputy, and told him that I had people trespassing on my property who were refusing to leave when asked. Jim came over in his patrol car within minutes and explained to Victoria that she needed to leave immediately, or she would be arrested for trespassing. As they walked away from my house, I could hear Madison asking Victoria desperately what they were going to do about school, dance classes, and everything else that had been canceled. Victoria kept saying that they would figure it out somehow and that they would make it work, but I could see it clearly in Victoria's face through my window. She was starting to realize that playing house with Tyler was a lot easier and more fun when someone else was paying all the bills and handling all the real responsibilities of raising a child. Tuesday came and went exactly like I had expected it would. Madison got officially withdrawn from St. Michael's private school due to non-payment of tuition. Wednesday morning, she had to enroll at Lincoln High School, which is our local public school. Lincoln isn't a bad school by any means, but it's definitely a significant step down from the private education she had been receiving for years. The class sizes are larger, the resources are more limited, and the overall academic environment is much less prestigious than what she was used to. I know all this happened because my buddy, who works maintenance at Lincoln High, texted me Wednesday afternoon. He said he had seen a girl who looked just like me enrolling in classes and asked if everything was okay with my family. I told him that everything was fine and that there were just some changes happening in our living arrangements. I didn't feel like getting into the whole complicated story with him. Thursday arrived, and I was at work running HVAC installation for a new medical office building when my phone started absolutely blowing up with calls and messages. This time, it wasn't just text messages. Victoria was actually calling me repeatedly. She called me 13 times between my lunch break and quitting time, and I didn't answer any of the calls. However, she left voicemails for almost every single call, and I listened to them when I got home from work. The first few voicemail messages were the same old guilt trip routine I'd been hearing for days. Victoria kept saying that I was being cruel to an innocent child, that Madison was suffering because of my wounded pride, and that I needed to think about Madison's future instead of focusing on my hurt feelings. It was the same broken record I'd been hearing over and over again since this whole situation started, but the later messages were noticeably different in tone. Victoria's voice was getting progressively more panicked and aggressive with each voicemail she left. She started talking about taking legal action against me and trying to prove that I was an unfit parent who was neglecting his responsibilities. She threatened to force me to pay child support if she had to take me to court. The last voicemail was particularly interesting, though. Victoria's voice sounded like she had been crying, and she was actually begging me to just talk to them and work something out. She said that Tyler wanted to have a reasonable conversation with me, and maybe we could all sit down like adults and figure out a solution that worked for everyone involved. The translation of that message was pretty clear. They were completely broke and getting desperate. They had realized that they couldn't afford to support Madison's lifestyle or pay for the things she needed, and they were starting to panic about how they were going to manage everything. The next morning, I found out just how desperate they had become. I was getting ready for work and was about to leave the house at 6:45 a.m. when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. I looked out the window and saw Tyler's bright yellow Mustang parked directly behind my truck, effectively blocking me in so I couldn't leave for work. All three of them got out of the car. Victoria looking like she hadn't slept in days, Madison looking scared and angry at the same time, and Tyler looking like he was ready for some kind of confrontation. This was 6:45 in the morning, and they were showing up at my house completely uninvited, trying to ambush me before I could get to work. I grabbed my coffee and opened the front door before they could start banging on it, because I wanted to control this situation from the very beginning. "Y'all need to leave," I told them firmly. "I've got to get to work, and you're blocking my truck." Tyler stepped forward, and I could immediately tell that he was trying to intimidate me physically. The guy probably had about 40 pounds on me, and I think he believed that his gold chain and tough guy attitude made him some kind of badass. He started talking about how we needed to resolve this situation once and for all, and how there were adult ways to handle disagreements between people. Here I was, standing on my own front porch in my work clothes with my coffee, and this dude who works part-time at Target was trying to lecture me about being an adult and handling things maturely. Madison was hanging back by Tyler's car, but she was recording everything on her phone. She was being smart about the situation, probably figuring that if things went bad, she would have video evidence of whatever happened. What she didn't know was that I had my own recording devices that were much more sophisticated than her phone camera. "There's nothing to resolve," I told them clearly. "Madison made her choice about who her real family is, and y'all can handle her expenses from now on." That simple statement was when Victoria completely lost what was left of her composure. She started screaming at the top of her lungs about how I was abandoning my responsibilities as a father. She yelled that a real father would never punish his child like this, and that I was traumatizing Madison for life by cutting off her support. Victoria was becoming increasingly hysterical, and her voice was getting louder with every accusation she made. Tyler tried to position himself as the reasonable one in this situation. He said that he understood I was hurt by what had happened, but that we were talking about a kid's future here. He suggested that maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement where I continued to help with school costs and major expenses, while he handled the day-to-day parenting responsibilities and emotional support. I almost laughed out loud at his proposal. Tyler wanted me to keep funding Madison's entire lifestyle, while he got to be the fun dad who didn't have to worry about bills, responsibilities, or any of the difficult aspects of parenting. He wanted to have all the benefits of being considered her father figure without any of the financial obligations that come with actually raising a child. Nah, I told him firmly. You wanted to be her father figure, so now you can figure it out on your own. My response was calm but definitive. I wasn't interested in any kind of compromise or shared arrangement. That's when the whole situation went completely sideways. Tyler's facial expression changed dramatically, and he stepped up onto my front porch, getting right in my face in an aggressive, threatening manner. He started talking about how I was being completely unreasonable about the whole situation, how this was about much more than just money, and how maybe I needed someone to explain reality to me in terms I could understand. I told him to get off my property immediately. Instead of backing down or leaving, Tyler shoved me backwards toward my front door. He pushed me hard enough that I had to catch myself against the doorframe to keep from falling down. "We're going to settle this right now," he said in a threatening tone. "You're going to start taking care of your responsibilities, or we're going to have a serious problem." At that moment, I realized that this guy had just physically assaulted me on my own property while making direct threats about what would happen if I didn't comply with his demands. But I also knew that I had security cameras covering my front porch, driveway, and living room, which meant that everything that was happening was being recorded in high definition. So instead of fighting back or escalating the situation, I tried to get inside my house where I could safely call the police. But Tyler followed me, pushing his way through my front door like he owned the place. "We're not done talking," he said aggressively, and then he shoved me again, much harder this time. I stumbled backwards into my living room and almost fell over my coffee table. Victoria was right behind Tyler, screaming at me to just agree to keep paying for Madison's expenses. She wasn't trying to stop Tyler from assaulting me. She was actually encouraging him and telling him that I needed to understand how serious the situation was. Meanwhile, Madison was standing in my doorway with her phone out, still recording everything that was happening. She wasn't telling Tyler to stop attacking me, she wasn't trying to protect me, and she wasn't calling for help. She was just documenting whatever was about to happen. Tyler started pushing me around my own living room, shoving me into furniture and knocking things over. He was yelling about how I was a deadbeat father who didn't deserve to have a daughter. According to Tyler, real men take care of their responsibilities no matter what, and I was failing as both a father and a man. I was trying to get to my phone so I could call 911, but Tyler was bigger than me, and he wasn't letting up on his assault. He shoved me so hard that I actually went down, hitting my shoulder against the sharp corner of my entertainment center. That impact was definitely going to leave a serious bruise, and I knew I was going to be sore for days afterward. Victoria was still screaming at me to just agree to pay for everything, like getting beaten up in my own house was somehow supposed to convince me to hand over money to people who thought I was completely worthless. But the moment that really got to me the most was when Tyler finally backed off from his assault. He was breathing hard and standing over me while I was still on the floor, trying to recover from being shoved around my own living room. Madison looked directly at me while I was down and said, "That's what you get for being so dramatic." My own daughter, watching some guy assault me in my own house, was telling me that I deserved to be physically attacked for having the audacity to cut off her funding. She was essentially saying that I had brought this violence on myself by refusing to continue paying for her lifestyle after she'd called me just a stepdad. That's when I knew there was absolutely no coming back from this situation. This wasn't about hurt feelings or typical teenage rebellion anymore. This was about revealing who these people really were when they didn't get their way. When faced with consequences for their actions and words, they had resorted to violence and intimidation, and Madison had endorsed it. Tyler, Victoria, and Madison finally left my house after Tyler made direct threats to come back and finish this conversation if I didn't start acting like a real father. Victoria was still crying and making demands about money as they walked out. Madison was still recording everything with her phone, probably planning to post it somewhere on social media to make me look bad or to have evidence to use against me somehow. But here's what they didn't know. I've had a professional security camera system installed in my house since last year, after there were several break-ins in our neighborhood. It's a comprehensive system with cloud backup, motion sensors, and multiple camera angles. Everything that had just happened in my house was recorded from several different angles in high-definition video with clear audio. It was time to see how tough Tyler would feel when the police got involved in this situation. Saturday morning, I drove straight to the police station with everything saved on a flash drive. The detective who took my statement watched the security footage, and his reaction was exactly what you'd expect from a law enforcement professional. He was absolutely shocked that a daughter would stand there recording while some guy assaulted her father in his own home and then tell him he deserved it. The police arrested Tyler at the Target store where he works part-time. Apparently, it made quite a scene, with customers recording on their phones while Tyler got handcuffed in the electronics section. His manager wasn't too happy about that kind of negative publicity for the store, and I imagine Tyler's employment situation became even more precarious after that incident. Victoria got charged as an accessory to assault since she had been encouraging Tyler and making demands while he was physically attacking me. The police picked her up at a DoorDash pickup location on Saturday evening. The bail hearing was scheduled for Tuesday, and it turns out that Tyler had prior assault charges from 4 years ago. So this wasn't his first time beating someone up when he didn't get his way or when someone refused to give him what he wanted. The judge set bail at $55,000, which neither Tyler nor Victoria could afford to pay. Victoria had been calling her sister Gabriella non-stop, trying to get money together for bail, but apparently even her extended family didn't think the situation was worth that kind of financial investment. Meanwhile, I was getting text messages from Madison that were absolutely unbelievable in their tone and content. She was calling me a snitch for getting Tyler arrested, saying that I was ruining their lives over absolutely nothing. According to Madison, I was proving how vindictive and petty I really was by involving the police in what she considered a minor disagreement. Not one word of apology from her. Not one acknowledgement that maybe watching your father get assaulted in his own home isn't normal or acceptable behavior. Just pure anger that there were real consequences for their actions, and that Tyler and Victoria couldn't just assault me and walk away without any repercussions. Wednesday, I met with my lawyer Robert about updating my will and other legal documents. I'd had the same will since Madison was 9 years old, back when I thought she would grow up to be a decent human being with basic moral values. Everything in my will was set to go directly to her. The house, my retirement accounts, my life insurance payout, and the entire college fund I'd built up over the years. Robert asked if I was sure about making such drastic changes to my will, explaining that sometimes family disputes work themselves out over time and that people often reconcile after emotions cool down. I showed him the security footage of my own daughter, telling me I deserved to get beaten up by some guy who had known her for only 4 weeks. Jesus Christ, Robert said after watching the video. That's really your kid saying that? The shock and disbelief in his voice confirmed that what had happened wasn't normal family conflict. It was something much more serious and disturbing. We spent 2 hours completely rewriting my entire will and estate planning documents. St. Jude's Children's Hospital is now going to receive my house and half of my retirement money when I die. The other half of my retirement funds is going to establish a scholarship fund specifically for kids whose parents have actually died or abandoned them. Real orphans who would genuinely appreciate help and support, not spoiled brats who think they're entitled to everything without showing any gratitude or respect. The college fund that I had spent years building up to $95,000 is getting donated to Lincoln High School's college preparatory program. That money will help dozens of kids who actually want an education and who appreciate the opportunities they're given, instead of going to one kid who thinks she's too good for public school and who takes educational opportunities for granted. My life insurance beneficiary is now my brother Carlos instead of Madison. Carlos has 3 children of his own and could really use the financial help. At least I know that his kids respect him and would never stand there recording while he got beaten up by some stranger. His children understand the value of family and would never call him just a stepdad after everything he's done for them. Thursday morning, Madison showed up at my workplace, which was both surprising and concerning. Security called me up to the front desk because there was a young woman demanding to see me and causing a scene in the lobby. She had apparently taken the bus to get there since she no longer had access to a car, and the journey on public transportation had clearly been difficult for her. She looked absolutely terrible when I saw her. Her hair was unwashed and messy, her clothes were wrinkled like she'd been sleeping in them, and she had dark circles under her eyes. Living with Victoria and Tyler apparently wasn't nearly as glamorous as she had thought it would be when she made her decision to leave my house. "Dad, please," she said, when I came to the lobby to see what was happening. "This has gone way too far. You got Tyler arrested, Victoria can't afford bail, and I'm stuck in that tiny apartment with no car and no way to get around." She was clearly desperate and panicking about her situation. I corrected her immediately. "My name is Kevin, not Dad." I reminded her that I didn't get anyone arrested. Tyler got himself arrested by committing felonies against me in my own home. The consequences he was facing were the direct result of his own choices and actions, not anything I had done to him. Madison started crying again, but these weren't the manipulative tears she had used before when she wanted something from me. These were desperate, panicked tears from someone who was finally understanding the reality of her situation. "I can't live like this," she said between sobs. "Their apartment is absolutely disgusting. There's never any food in the refrigerator. Victoria is crying all the time, and I have to take 3 different buses just to get to school every day." I told her, "Welcome to the real world, kid. This is what happens when you choose people who can't actually take care of you properly." This was her first real taste of what life was like without the financial support and comfortable lifestyle I had been providing for her entire life. "I'm sorry I said those things," she continued, trying to sound sincere. "I was angry and confused, and I didn't mean any of it. You know you're my real dad? You've always been my real dad." But it was far too little, far too late. She had already had her chance to apologize before things escalated to physical violence. Instead, she had doubled down on her position and watched me get assaulted while telling me I deserved it. "If I'm your real dad, then why didn't you stop Tyler from attacking me?" I asked her directly. She couldn't answer that question. She just stood there crying while other people in the lobby stared at us and wondered what was happening. "Why did you record it instead of calling for help or trying to protect me?" I continued. Still no answer from her. "And why did you tell me I deserved to get beaten up in my own house?" That's when Madison finally broke down completely. She started sobbing uncontrollably about how she had been scared and confused during the whole situation. She claimed she didn't know what to do when Tyler was attacking me, and that Victoria and Tyler had been filling her head with lies about me for weeks. According to Madison, she had realized too late that Victoria and Tyler couldn't actually take care of her, or provide the lifestyle she was accustomed to. But I was completely done feeling sorry for her at that point. Some mistakes in life you can come back from, and people can learn and grow from their poor choices. However, watching your father get physically assaulted in his own home and then telling him he deserved it isn't one of those forgivable mistakes. That crosses a line that can never be uncrossed. "You made your choice about who your real family is," I told her firmly. "Now you need to live with the consequences of that decision." I walked away while she was still crying desperately in the lobby, and when she tried to follow me back to my work area, security escorted her out of the building. Friday, I got a call from the detective handling Tyler's case. Tyler had decided to take a plea deal rather than go to trial. He was sentenced to 20 months in county jail plus 3 years of probation. Victoria received 8 months of probation and was required to complete community service. Neither of them would be bothering me again anytime soon, and they would both have criminal records as a result of their actions. Saturday, I took several important steps to completely cut ties with this toxic situation. I changed my phone number so they couldn't continue harassing me with calls and texts. I blocked Madison on all social media platforms so she couldn't contact me or see what was happening in my life. I also had all the locks changed on my house, just in case Victoria had made copies of keys back when she lived there years ago. The bottom line is that actions have consequences. Some life lessons cost $95,000. Some lessons cost absolutely everything you thought you had. And that's where we are right now. It's been 2 weeks since I last saw Madison, and my house is quiet but genuinely peaceful for the first time in months. There's no more drama, no more entitled attitude, and no more watching someone I sacrificed everything for treat me like complete garbage. My coworkers keep asking if I'm okay because they know something significant happened. But I haven't told them the complete story. I just said that Madison moved out and we're not speaking anymore. They assume it's typical teenage rebellion that will blow over with time. If only they knew the real truth about what happened. I've been thinking a lot about what my lawyer, Robert, said regarding family disputes working themselves out over time. Maybe in some families, that's actually true. Maybe some people can move past serious conflicts and rebuild their relationships. But when your own child watches you get beaten in your own house and tells you that you deserved it, there's absolutely no coming back from that level of betrayal. That's not a simple dispute or misunderstanding. That's a fundamental character flaw that reveals who someone really is deep down. The funny thing is that I'm actually sleeping much better now than I have in years. For 13 straight years, I was constantly worried about Madison. I was always questioning whether I was doing enough for her, giving her enough opportunities, or being a good enough father. Now I finally know the answer to all those questions. According to Madison herself, I was just the guy who paid for stuff. And apparently, that's all I ever was to her. Well, mission accomplished, I guess. I paid for everything she wanted for 13 years and got nothing but disrespect, ingratitude, and betrayal in return. At least now I know exactly where I stood in her life. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh in my response, or if I should have given Madison more chances to apologize and make things right. Then I remember her standing in my doorway with that phone, calmly recording while Tyler shoved me around my own living room and telling me I deserved it for being dramatic. No, I definitely made the right choice in cutting her off completely. I've been getting calls from phone numbers I don't recognize. Probably Victoria using different phones to try to reach me, or maybe Madison borrowing someone's phone to contact me. I don't answer any of them. Whatever they want to say to me now, I don't want to hear it. They had their chance to be a real family, and they chose violence and entitlement instead. My brother Carlos called me yesterday because he had heard through our family grapevine that something serious had happened with Madison. He asked if I wanted to talk about what was going on and whether I needed any support. I told him the short version of what had transpired, hitting the major points without getting into every single detail. Carlos was quiet for a long time after I finished explaining the situation. Finally, he said, "Man, I'm really sorry this happened to you. I can't even imagine one of my kids doing something like that to me." Then he added, "But you did the right thing, Kevin. Sometimes you have to cut toxic people out of your life, even when they're supposed to be family." That's exactly what Madison became in the end. Toxic. She was poison disguised as family, slowly destroying my peace of mind and self-respect. For years, I thought that unconditional love meant accepting any kind of behavior from her, taking any abuse because she was my daughter, and I was supposed to love her no matter what. Now I realize that unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional tolerance for destructive behavior. You can love someone and still refuse to let them completely destroy you. The hardest part of this entire situation isn't missing Madison as she is now. The hardest part is mourning the daughter I thought I had. The girl who used to help me cook dinner every night, who got genuinely excited about our weekly grocery shopping trips, and who used to actually enjoy spending time with her old man. That girl died sometime between her first weekend at Victoria's place and the moment she called me just a stepdad. What came back to my house wasn't my daughter anymore. It was a stranger wearing her face, acting like someone I didn't recognize. People keep asking me if I think Madison will eventually come back and try to rebuild our relationship. They want to know if I'll forgive her when she grows up and realizes what she lost by treating me the way she did. The honest answer is that I don't know what will happen in the future, and more importantly, I don't care anymore. Some bridges you burn because you don't want to way back across them. This is definitely one of those bridges for me. Madison made her choice when she decided to choose Tyler over me, Victoria over me, violence over family, and entitlement over gratitude. She made it clear that she valued their approval more than the relationship we had built over 13 years. Now she gets to live with those choices permanently, without my money, without my support, and without my presence in her life. Maybe she'll learn something valuable from this experience. Maybe she won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore, and it's not my responsibility to fix. I gave 13 years of my life to raising what I thought was my daughter, but it turns out I was just funding someone else's project. Well, that project is officially over now. It's time for me to focus on my own life and my own future for once. And honestly, for the first time in 13 years, I'm genuinely looking forward to what comes next. I don't have to worry about someone else's drama, someone else's ingratitude, or someone else's entitled attitude. I don't have to walk on eggshells around someone who thinks I'm worthless despite everything I've sacrificed for them. My house is peaceful. My bank account is finally mine again. And I can make decisions based on what's best for me, rather than what's best for someone who doesn't appreciate anything I do. I spent over a decade putting Madison's needs and wants ahead of my own, and all I got in return was being called just a stepdad and watching her endorse violence against me. That chapter of my life is closed forever. Madison is an adult now, and she can figure out how to manage her own life with the family she chose. I'm done being anyone's ATM, and I'm done accepting disrespect from people who think they're entitled to my time, money, and energy. For the first time since Madison was 6 years old, I'm free to live my own life on my own terms. And that feels pretty damn good. TLDR. After raising my daughter alone for 13 years, her absent mother returned with her boyfriend and turned my daughter against me. When my daughter called me just a stepdad and watched me get assaulted while saying I deserved it, I cut off all financial support, sold her car, removed her from my will, and went completely no contact. Some bridges are meant to be burned.